Dear Cabbage, in my understanding, there are two ways to experience the precipice of infinity from the confines of a human body and mind. The first one is by closing one's eyes and getting into an imaginary spaceship and traveling within one's mind towards the end of the universe, an end which, if one engages one's imagination sufficiently, never truly arrives, and any expectation of finality marks the beginning of further distance into an everlasting profundity. The second one, notoriously, is through the pain one suffers when being tortured. The tortured subject expects and hopes with all their might for the moment when the pain will subside. But that moment never comes, and what remains is the breaking of the threshold of pain, an incessant pain, one that never truly leaves the soul, leaving it twisted beyond recognition, leaving behind as well something that through the visceral and bodily experience cannot be undone. The body under torture is suspended in the precipice of pain, an infinite pain, an eternal pain that bends time and the awareness of time out of shape. It is with this grotesque fear in mind that I am familiarizing you with such pain in a mild manner, because I do not know what will become of us behind closed doors if we are apprehended for our unusual and seemingly absurd cabbage walks. Given the recent 90s and the subsequent years, there is great mistrust in the state and in what it is capable of doing to mere civilians, not to mention what it has done and still does to those who it classified as insurgents. Parvez Imrose, the most recognized human rights lawyer of Kashmir, has stated that 1 out of 6 people in Kashmir have been tortured. There are almost 200,000 torture victims in Kashmir since 1990. The number of torture centers in Kashmir as of 1990 is 471, as assessed by human rights groups. As such, torture is not uncommon and has become, since the 90s, a habitual practice in occupied Kashmir. One simply does not know how the authorities will act behind closed doors once a person is taken into custody. We know how the authorities crush dissent and protests under AFSPA and PSA, so how they act out of public sight is equally, if not more, troubling. There is a complete trust deficit between the state and the local population that demands rights and justice. Consider as a small example that human rights groups in the valley have documented the torture of over 1,500 people who became impotent because their genitals were electrocuted mercilessly. Then there is the case of a man who was starved for a month and only given torn flesh from his own body to eat. According to The Guardian, in one cluster of 50 villages, more than 2,000 extreme cases of torture were documented, any of which would kickstart a Human Rights Commission inquiry, and all of which left victims maimed and psychologically scarred. Methods including branding, electric shocks, simulated drowning, striping flesh with razor blades, and piping petrol into anuses. There is the particular case of Kalandar Katana, a shepherd whose legs were cut off. In his interview with The Guardian, he stated, "I was held down. A BSF trooper produced a knife, and then I passed out as the blood gushed from me." There is also the case of Nasir Sheikh, a carpenter whose legs were cut off below the knee along with one of his hands. When interviewed by The Guardian, Nasir Sheikh said, "The smell was of death, urine, shit, sweat. You knew you were about to be slowly murdered. It was like being thrown down a well where no one could hear you scream." As the 2012 Guardian article by Kathy Scott Clark states, Torture is not only endemic, it is systemic in Kashmir. Such a situation of conflict where the state has absolute immunity and impunity with laws such as AFSPA and PSA in place, with rampant cases of torture and state excess, the psychological burden on ordinary Kashmiri civilians is colossal. In Kashmir Valley, 1 out of every 2 adults is mentally disturbed, according to a survey conducted by Doctors Without Borders, who have stated that their research reveals, and I quote, that 1 in every 5 adults in Kashmir is living with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. According to the Indian Express, approximately 1.8 million adults, equaling 45% of the adult population, suffer from mental distress in the Kashmir Valley. And a majority of people have experienced or witnessed conflict-related trauma. As such, the context of our cabbage walks together through the streets of Kashmir is not merely an absurd act for the amusement of our fellow Kashmiris, but rather it also entails taking a certain risk of falling prey to the hands of a volatile and psychotic state. It is in this context that I am doing to you what I am doing, as I said, to familiarize you with a modicum of what is to come if we are apprehended, and the same treatment is given to you as has been given to countless other tortured Kashmiris. One has to know what to expect. Our cabbage walks could go unperceived or could be held in contempt by the state, but one cannot risk being unprepared for the worst. I know you will feel differently about me after this pain that I have put you through, but understand that what I am doing to you is what I have already done to myself.